Well, again, welcome to this ICF Orange County presentation. Just a little background, as I mentioned, for those who were here with us last week, ICF Global is really kicking off a DEI JB, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and belonging. And that's really a big emphasis that ICF Global is trying to focus on. And they're encouraging, or I guess encouraging is probably the good word to say, all chapters to really kind of focus on some of these issues. And so we decided in November to kind of be a kickoff for that event. Last week, we had an overview of DEI. Today, we have a specific topic that is involved in DEI. And this coming Thursday, we have another topic in that. I'll share about that later this morning or this afternoon, depending on your time zone. Just about to this morning's event, Bruce is going to be doing a presentation, and it's during that time he has a time for Q&A. So at certain times he will ask for questions regarding the things he had just covered. If, however, you do have a question that you want to put down in the chat room, just so we make sure we see it there during that time, please feel free to do that. But when we get to that Q&A period, we'll just ask you to raise your hand and ask those questions. Also, we have set aside 90 minutes for this, but how Bruce is designing it is about 60 minutes of presentation. For those who maybe need to leave in an hour or so, you may do so, but then we will have another 30 minutes or so of Q&A with Bruce. So you're invited to remain for the full 90 minutes. I think that answers, or at least it addresses some of those question pieces for this today. I do want to go ahead and introduce you with Bruce bio, because what I love about it, he says, first of all, kind of his credentials, and then he has a little quote to say, make it more personalized, which I love, by the way, Bruce, because most people just kind of keep it business-like, and this is what I do, here's my accomplishments and everything, and this is really great. So I'm going to read his words. Bruce Hostetter is a PCC life coach, trained at Invite Change at Edmonds, Washington, certified as an ADHD coach and health and wellness coach. Bruce is focused on workplace wellness with organizations of all sizes, doing one-on-one and team coaching and facilitating wellness programs. In Bruce's own words, quote, coming from a background in architectural design and sustainability focused on whole living systems, I was drawn to the field of coaching, where some of the big challenges facing people and organizations were of far greater interest to me than those problems found in the built environment. I find magic in coaching. My human loves to travel, cross country, ski, cycle, hike, sing, improvise, and be in community while listening to local live music. I finally love my ADHD brain. I just had to figure out how to retrain it, let neuroplasticity take its course, and allow my personal volition shape my life, end quote. And I love what you said too. I find magic in coaching. I think of all of us who are coaches, we do find magic in coaching. And so it's so great to introduce and hand over to all of you, our presenter today, Bruce Hostetter.
Hello, everybody. I'm really happy to be here in Orange County. And I noticed when Daryl read or recited the thing about the magic, coaching magic, there were a lot of smiles on the screen. So maybe that's the prompt, Lori. You know, you before these events, you say, hey, think about the magic of coaching, right? Then you get these genuine smiles. I'm really pleased to be here. And in some ways, I feel like I'm there because I'm in Washington State, have been for over 10 years, but I'm originally from California. I'm actually a fifth generation native, going back to early Spanish California ancestors. And I know Orange County well. And one thing that I'm reminded of is when I was there back around 2004, 2005, I was one of the founders of the USGBC Orange County chapter, the Orange County chapter of the US Green Building Council. So I can identify with your setting, where you are, the energy. And I know that this is a very vital chapter from all the events you put on, some of the partnerships we've done. I'm also on the board. I'm on the board of the Washington State ICF, and my role is what's called directors of communities. We had satellites because of our size. They put on events. COVID hit, everything became virtual. We began to question, what does a satellite mean? And so now we're really using the concept of communities to create connection, to be a catalyst and conveyor of things that are more grassroots. I'd also like to just say regarding DEI, DIJB, that, as Daryl said, Global has really set in motion a lot of resources and models and examples for us to be looking at DEI. And since I think I have some time built in my presentation, I just want to meander here for a minute and talk about Global. And I don't know how much you have communicated to members the resources that exist at Global, but when I went through the orientation as a board member, I was completely blown away by all that's there and the people who are in leadership that want to connect with us, want to connect with members. So if you have questions about that, ask your board members more about that. In our chapter, I'd like to explain a little bit about our chapter in terms of how we're addressing DEI. It's been a focus for probably 2 years. We're actually going to do an event in 2023 telling the story of our equity working group and our BIPOC group. We have a BIPOC group, which is an affinity group or, special interest group. And when this became a topic at the board level, the board decided that we needed to integrate DEI into everything that we do. And one of the ways we did that was to rewrite our 4 pillars so that the language in those 4 pillars actually address the topic. We're also doing something really interesting, which is we've selected a book. We're reading the 4 Pivots right now. And it's not exactly a book club as much as it is we read. We have like 4 different meetings set up once a month. And then we just have discussions. And the discussions really are very much about sharing and being vulnerable. And vulnerability is what I have found to be one of the keys. I come from the 60s. So I was a 60s. Some people would have called me a hippie. I was definitely a progressive. And so when it came to race and equity issues, I thought I was pretty progressive until I hit this wall called DEI. And then people within our own chapter began to inform me, oh, well, what about this? What about that? And you realize this is a whole different conversation. And it really does have to do with a willingness to talk and share and be vulnerable. It's that vulnerability that allows us to connect in really meaningful ways, so that the inclusion part isn't just token, isn't just something that is fulfilling, giving us the ability to check off the box. So with that, I'm just going to say about the presentation, I have organized it so there's slides that'll come up and ask about discussion. Those would be great times to just come off of mute. If you have your question, I think the best way to do it, even in a small group, is either raise hands or raise hands and reactions so we can take everybody in the right order. Anything else? I wanted in the last hour to add more stuff to my presentation. So I also have these other clouds that are floating around in my brain. And that's pretty typical of somebody with a neurodivergent brain. So we'll get started. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. Also, there will be an intermission now, in which I want to bring up 3 videos. They're very short videos, but they can say things that I cannot say because they're represented by people in community and organizations. Okay, can you see my screen? Yes?
Yes.
All right. So just to be more specific, sorry, I'm trying to find my mouse. Just to be a little more specific about the agenda, I'm going to start by defining 4 or 5 different things related to the topic. There's a poll, and the purpose of the poll is just to get your personal experience on a few questions. I have 3 videos that I want to share. I'll be ending by discussing some of the benefits. What's interesting to me is that as I look at the arguments for DEI and related to the workplace, a lot of times it has to do with how it benefits businesses, and there are a lot of benefits. But it also benefits the individuals, and it benefits everyone in the organization, because in some ways, people have brains like mine can be very disturbing. Sometimes that disturbance can be positive, sometimes it can be really annoying and challenging. But one of the things that they found is that having a neurodivergent workforce does create more camaraderie, it breaks down barriers, It changes expectations. It introduces new ways of being. All right, so going. So as I'm actually going to back up a little bit. The start of the slide. When I think it was Daryl, right? You were the one who posed this question. Would I be willing to do a talk on the subject? And you said, based on my conversation with Petra, when we talked about ADHD, I want to share my reaction to that. I didn't share it with you, but in order to do that, I have to use some colorful language. So hopefully we're a small group. We're now a family bonded together, and you'll understand why. When Daryl, when you first presented this idea to me, in the back of my head, I'm going, neurodiversity, ADHD, DEI, but I'm a fuck up. You know, it was like, why would there be any sort of protection for people like me? Why would there be attention toward this subject? And I thought, well, I've got some research to do. Now, I know a lot about ADHD from my coaching, but I don't know much about how it relates to this. And I thank you really for the opportunity to explore a niche. And I think that's one of the things you're wanting to do at the chapter level, is looking at DEI. There's a lot of obvious areas, but what are the niches? And I think those niches really reinforce the whole importance of belonging, creating that safe place for everyone to feel like they have a place there and can be understood. So with that, what I noticed is that the common things that were associated with neurodivergence and this topic were ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, autism spectrum, Asperger's, OCD. There was also addressed learning disabilities like dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, and those kind of fit in there. So there's this sort of trail, this trail of neurodiversity that goes back to grade school, where people who were brought into the world with a brain that's different, and it's referred to sometimes as thinking difference, are either going to be identified or not. They may have problems or struggles with school. Those problems can create real wounds and sometimes trauma because of the misunderstandings. I mean, I remember my 8th grade teacher talked to me after class one day, and he just said, you know, you were in my science class for summer school. I know what you're capable of. You'd be a really good student if you didn't spend so much time looking out the window. And I felt horrible, you know, because like there was a way to get approval from this guy, but obviously I was doing something wrong. Well, what am I doing? I'm dreaming, right? I'm a dreamer. I'm a visionary. I'm a designer now. I'm an artist. So it all makes sense. But at that time, people didn't really think about those things. So there's some of the classifications. There's been this evolution of DEI, plus belonging, plus justice, and this is how we refer to it as well in our chapter. But along the way, there's also, it's important to talk about what's really weird, just so you know what I'm doing. I'm trying to find my mouse so I can minimize the boxes, and I can't find my box when I'm in this mode, so I'll do my best. Disability inclusion is about creating an inclusive workplace where people feel welcome and comfortable, seen, valued, and appreciated. And I can't read the rest of it because my toolbar is hovering in that way.
Would you like me to read it for you, Bruce?
Sure, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll start over. Disability inclusion is about creating an inclusive workplace where people feel welcome and comfortable, and where they are seen, valued, and appreciated for what they bring to the table, not in spite of their differences, but including their differences.
Thank you.
Sure.
Now, this is something I just added. This is from McKinsey. If you're familiar with McKinsey, it does a lot of research. These were some of the statistics that they had, some of the points that they made, the arguments they're making for diversity and inclusion in the workplace. That there's actually evidence that there's higher performance in companies that do address it. More likely to have greater financial returns. So this is kind of the economic side. What I'm also aware of is that from my personal experience and from the observations that I've made of other people and clients, it makes a big difference to the individual. And part of what DEI is about in my mind, is also protecting the individual. What are they protecting it from? Stereotypes. Like I said, I'm just enough F up. There are these beliefs that get ingrained and reinforced, and even in the people, it affects self-esteem among clients, and that's like a whole other area that needs to be worked with. But when somebody who has been classified and maybe not recognized and not seen and is seen, and all of that sudden has a new place on the table, the opportunities for that person to perform at a higher level benefit the individual and the organization, right? So that's a point I would just like to make here, because a lot of the arguments that I've seen have to do with the business benefits, and there are a lot of them out there. So I think this is a really interesting example of how to think about neurodiversity. That Pat's brain is yellow, and all his friends' brains are a different color. And different kinds of brains can be grouped together, and that's kind of how you look at neurodiversity or neurodivergence. Some are typical, some are schizophrenic, bipolar, autistic, epileptic. The main thing is that whether you're diagnosed or not, there's a lot of variety, a lot of diversity. And what has happened with the introduction of the term neurodivergence, neurotypical, non-neurotypical, those terms have been around for a long time. Neurodivergence found its footing by making this clarification that we don't have to look at thinking differences, different brains as pathologies, right? So ADHD, that's in the DSM-5. It's something that's considered a disorder. And a lot of the people who do the kind of coaching that I do and the work that I do are trying to reinforce the fact that, no, it's not a disorder, it's a gift that comes with certain challenges, and those challenges are challenges that are capable of overcoming. Just reviewing right now, this is not in the script, but one of the things that was really shocking to me was a presentation that I heard by a fellow named Dr. Russell Barkley. And if you're interested in this topic, I would write his name down. Simple to search, lots of material out there. He's an expert psychiatrist who's talked a lot about and worked with families and other groups with ADHD in particular. And he basically looks at ADHD as a emotional dysregulation, that one of the common themes is emotional dysregulation, even though that is not included in the DSM-5 for ADHD. It's one of the conflicts that he has with the board that organizes that. And it's easy to think of that as, well, maybe having uncontrolled outbursts or inappropriate remarks. What it really has to do with is impulsivity and impulse control, and being emotionally aroused by a certain thing that just seems like it has immediate importance, even though it may not, and later ends up having negative impacts in your life. So it's about thinking differently. It's about channeling. It's about, like I said, retraining the brain so that you can have this different brain, not think of it as a pathology. And I can tell you this, that all the people that I've coached who come to me present with ADHD, none of them want to be neurotypical. They're not looking to be fixed. They're looking to figure out how to work, how to function in the world. So, some definitions of neurodiversity. I'm going to have you read that, Daryl.
And you're just go ahead and mute myself there. Excuse me. What is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is the perspective that people with cognitive differences are not defective or deficient. These differences reflect natural variations in how the brain is wired.
Thank you. So what it means that we need to reframe some of these distinctions. We need to broaden understanding of what diversity means. Just like I have been, my sense of understanding diversity and inclusion has really been broadened just by the research that I do. That there are definite strengths that go along with it, and sometimes the on the other side of the strengths, there are things that are going to be frustrating. For example, my background, like I mentioned, I came from the world of architectural design. For 25 years, I was an architectural lighting designer, worked in a couple of small firms. And one of those firms, I can remember reaching a point where the principal said, Bruce, I've been after you for months to maintain this section with invoices in your notebook. You've never been able to do it. Good news. I'm taking that responsibility away from you, and I'm going to take it myself. Now, why would he do that? I mean, in certain situations, someone might get fired or might get reprimanded or you put on probation, right? For not doing something as important as maintaining the financial records for a project. And it was because he recognized that I had other value. And so he was willing to compensate. And what I found in all my partnerships with people is that very often there's this pattern of just creating incredible frustration because of something I can't understand that's annoying the other person. But getting to know each other long enough for that person to realize my value, the unique contributions that I have to make, and therefore switching from a place of conflict to a place of alliance, where we figure out how to work with each other because it's to our mutual good. Does that make sense? All right. And yeah, this is typically true. You often hear people talk about people being creative, engaged, and motivated, so long as they can be aligned with the things that really turn them on. Now, sorry, I'm just pausing because I thought I had a section for question and answer. Actually, I will. Before we go on to autism, does anybody have any comments? Any personal stories, people they work with, clients, things that are brought up by what we've talked about so far?
Feel free to either unmute yourself or raise your hand. I do have one question, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to say this, but you know, how does one know if they have ADHD or any other kind of these things? Are there tests for that, or you know, because I've full disclosure, my niece who works with special needs children in Tustin Unified School District, she always says to me, "Oh, Daryl, you have ADHD," and I'm thinking, well, how do you know that? So if you have any insight on that, Bruce, that would be great to know.
That's a really good question, because there are some people who in their 20s, particularly males, don't want to know or don't want to get diagnosed because they're in denial. And the answer to that question may be really scary. There are a lot of tests. There's a lot of different tests. And typically they're conducted by a psychiatrist or an MD. They're done in the context of looking at medical history and family history. Like, for example, I don't do diagnostics because that would be a conflict of interest, right? I could just say everybody's ADHD. Daryl, you're ADHD, you need coaching. And that would be a conflict of interest.
Sign me up.
So it's best to have the diagnosis by somebody who's experienced and qualified. The nature of the diagnosis is based on the DSM-5. So the questions have to do with hyperactivity. They have to do with you know, having problems with focus and inattention. You can't just come up with a score and then declare somebody to be ADHD. You need to take a look at their personal history, medical history, family history, and make a judgment about all those different factors. Typically what happens is by the time you go through the process that somebody is, they're pretty well convinced. My story is, back around 2005, I was working for a lighting design firm that was really quite well known. And I was in a new role in their firm doing fixture design. We weren't just doing architectural lighting design, we were starting to do fixture design. And at some point, the principals who I knew well and had worked with before said, you know what, I've got to let you go. You're driving Zoe crazy. And so I was telling this story to friends of mine who are therapists, husband and wife therapists. And as I'm doing that, they just both look at each other. And one of them says, hey, Bruce, have you ever thought about the possibility you might be ADHD? And I said, oh no, there's no way that's possible because I work with somebody who is ADHD. I'm nothing like her. Complete denial, right? But I'm a curious guy. So what I decided to do was to what do you call it? Truth check it, you know, to see whether this is true or not. So I started researching it, asking questions. I was working with a doctor. He was doing this diagnostic process. And finally, after a year, because at that time, I was a real pharmaphobe. I didn't want to have to take medication. And I was beginning to believe that I probably was. It's simple. Just let me give you a prescription of Adderall. And I'm prescribing this to you. If I could prescribe it, I would prescribe it to you, Daryl. Take Adderall. If it agitates you, you do not have an ADHD brain. If it calms you, you do have an ADHD brain. And this is because we haven't really talked about the causes, some of the root causes, which I will address in a later slide. But it has to do with synapses and neurotransmitters and things like that in the prefrontal cortex. And apparently I was deficient. This supplemented, and I had 4 hours of bliss. I mean, the most calm, focused 4 hours of my life until it was over. And then it was rebound, and then it was horrible. So I use that as my definitive way of understanding that. Now, not everybody's going to have that experience because not everybody responds the same way to medication. There's different kinds of medication. I'll tell you another story about medication a little further on. But and it's also a challenge to find good prescribers, especially today, because a lot of prescribers are, and I don't want to dismiss, the value of a nurse practitioner or a PA, but a lot of times it's not the person who has all the training and the qualifications to go through the process to both diagnose and then tailor the medications to that person. Does that answer your question or address your question?
Yeah, that sure does. Thank you, Bruce.
Okay. All right. So now autism. I thought this slide was really, really interesting because I think that my prejudice, and again, this, a lot of this DEI stuff has to do with challenging us, challenging our preconceived notions of what the world is, because our brains are automatically designed to predict the future. And we have a mechanism for prediction error that will help us change the prediction so that it can be more accurate. That's all about survival. It's just the way the brain works. And so in my brain, I really saw it as, oh yeah, there's the high functioning autistic, low functioning autistic. And really it's more complex than that because these are whole people, and these are people who contribute in the workplace. And you'll see examples of that as we go forward in this presentation. Oh, that's where I had a discussion. I see there's a couple, I can't access chat. Is there anything in chat that I need to be, or you need to be aware of?
Nothing in chat I don't see.
Okay. Okay, so what is it, Daryl?
Let's see. It's the rest of
I can't read that side of my screen, and I can't move the.
Yeah, it's missing there, Bruce.
Yeah.
So it's just saying what is I don't have any words after what is ADHD.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I couldn't see the ADHD, so I wasn't sure what slide I was on.
Okay, yeah. What is ADHD?
Okay. So it's considered in most cases to be a neurodevelopment issue. It has to do with how you're born, how the brain organizes itself from birth. And that's why in part of the questionnaire for looking at how do you diagnose ADHD, you ask the question, how far back did you see symptoms? And typically you'll be able to recognize symptoms in school. Grade school is the first kind of portal through which you go where you have evidence that there's a problem, right? So it should go back to early childhood education times, when you're in the first grade, second grade, third grade, maybe fifth grade. Usually it shows up by then because this is not an acquired condition. Now, there are some people who have ADHD symptoms who were born neurotypical and had brain trauma, had some kind of serious illness or disease that affected their brain, and as a result of that, contributed to those factors. But typically it's considered to be something that happens in utero. And some of the symptoms are impulsivity. So an example of impulsivity in my case was after my father died and I acquired his little business making chemicals for firefighting, I decided that I was going to make a new one. I spent a month in my garage as a scientist with 200 chemical samples formulating this new formula, and it never really provided any economic revenues, benefits. So it became this thing in my marriage where whenever there was a big conflict and my wife needed to remind me of the challenges that I presented, we just talked about, fine water, you know. So that was like me not being able to have the sense of looking at the consequences of something and looking at all the possibilities. Maybe it's going to work, maybe it's not. If it doesn't, do I really want to make those, you know, own those and what I'm trying to say, bear the consequences of those. And lacking that ability to impulse control can lead to all kinds of small and big problems. Difficult paying attention. And I think this one is a little bit of a misnomer. I think what it is that a lot of people with ADHD have multiple attention. We were talking at the beginning when we were warming up about multitasking. That's different. This is when your brain is multitasking. And so it's very hard to figure out where to focus, which thing to bring in. Tendency to hyperfocus on certain tasks. And this is related, this is different than flow. Some of you may have heard of flow and a flow state. And flow state is a very different kind of mental state where you're going with what is being presented and where your attention is. Hyperfocus is when you just get so focused on something that you don't even know that the world exists. And I was hyperfocused for a month on that particular challenge. I also want to bring up something that isn't mentioned here, but in children, it's more often hyperactivity. And one of the theories on why children will experience, or adults will observe children in a hyperactive state, is because it's a way to self-regulate the signal noise ratio in the brain. And what that means is, going back to that attention issue of everything being important, when everything is important, it turns into noise. So one way to have signal in your life is to do something that you generate, and you do it with your body, and that becomes the dominant signal, and all of a sudden there's a stronger signal to noise ratio. So even though what you're doing may not be considered important by your teachers, by your spouse, by your boss, it is a way to generate that kind of focus and calm in your brain. Developmental delay. And I can share more about ADHD than I can some of the other things. Russell Barkley believes that ADHD is a form of developmental delay. And it's been noted that when you look at developmental measurements of development of students in grammar school and high school, there can be as much as a 2 to 3 year lag in their stage of development. That lag can continue into adulthood, even into your mid-20s. So it's not over when you leave school. And I think it can also follow you through your entire life, because what happens is you develop certain holes in certain areas where you just don't have the understanding of social cues, for example, or boundary control that other people might have. And it's something that, the interesting thing about ADHD is that all the problems that are presented are things that, if they're unaddressed, can have huge consequences. The highest rates of suicide, the highest rate of death huge risk for having untreated ADHD. And on the other hand, if you treat ADHD and you have somebody who's willing to go through the treatment and willing to work with a coach, work with a therapist, there's such a high probability that you're going to be able to overcome most of these challenges in a way that takes away the risk. And then impaired executive function. I think in the next slide, it's a really interesting map of the brain. And don't ask me to explain it to you. I understand some of the basics, but this is how complex executive control is. And basically, the prefrontal cortex, which you see on the left of the screen, is the area of the brain that's attributed to many of the different things we associate with executive function. But it's interacting with the thalamus and the limbic system and the amygdala, so that when emotions get involved, there's all these pathways that are going back and forth, communication and formation of neurotransmitters and hormones and different things that determine how somebody focuses. So it's a complex thing, but the prefrontal cortex is the primary area where things can, where things are not happening. What it means is that in the synapses in our brain, in the prefrontal cortex, there's simply a deficiency, typically thought of as a deficiency of dopamine. Dopamine is one of the chief neurotransmitters. And it's more complicated than that. It also has to do with, synapses have two sides, and there's a side that's infusing the neurotransmitter. There's an uptake device that brings some of those back. Sometimes medications will increase the uptake, so it increases the amount of neurotransmitters in that synapse. There's also receptor issues, and other kinds of medications can be helpful for that. So, one more time, anything come up for anyone? Things you want to share, questions that are raised?
Hello, this is Donna. I am mildly ADHD, and a lot of this is resonating for me. And I love that you're partnering by having someone else read the slides. That's something I would definitely do. And learning to partner like that has really made a huge difference in my emotional dysregulation and in my ability to do things, is to realize what is difficult and find somebody to do that piece for me. So I just wanted to share that.
Would you like to share any more about how partnering has, or what kind of situation partnering has helped?
Yeah, first of all, I would say that I was raised to think that I had to do everything myself. And, I've had my coaching business for 17 years, and I did everything. And because of my interest in everything, I could do everything, but I couldn't do everything well. And now when I do a Zoom, I have somebody there dealing with all the technical stuff. I have, a web guy. I used to develop web stuff myself. I have a VA that's amazing. My husband does my bookkeeping now, and it takes him 2 hours, and it used to take me 12. And it's just opens me up to do what I'm good at, the creative stuff, the visioning, the connecting with people. And it's just really made a huge difference in my life. Now, what's funny is that because I've always built systems to take care of the issues. I put my purse on my lap when I go to lunch because I know I'll forget it. I have friends that are ADHD that have strong impulsivity, and they won't believe that I'm ADHD. And in a way, that's hurtful to me.
And so were you diagnosed at a certain point?
Yes, I was diagnosed at about 45 by a therapist. I had been to many therapists before, and nobody else identified it. But, he spent time to give a very clear diagnosis.
Are you willing to share what your experience was, how you felt when you received that diagnosis and really took it in?
I felt relieved. I grew up being made fun of by my parents, or punished for these issues. And I spent so much energy trying to not lose my sweater and remember what somebody just told me, because I forget. And luckily I married someone that laughs when I can't remember what we just decided to have for dinner. And yeah, I just felt really relieved. My parents and teachers always said I wasn't living up to my potential. I also have dysgraphia, so that hurt my math especially. And I just felt forgiveness for myself.
Yeah, because it's not something that's wrong with you. There's an explanation for it, right?
Right. It kind of let me not be, a failure or deficient. It allowed me to just say I'm different and there's a reason for it, and kind of just think back to all these people who made fun of me for different things, or bullied me for different things. They were bullying somebody that had a disorder.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate sharing all of that.
Thank you.
I know that when one day I was listening to NPR a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, in an office setting, and they had this piece on dyscalculia. I don't know if everyone knows what dyscalculia is, but it's basically dyslexia with numbers. And my history was one where I had a father, self-educated, inventor, brilliant. I wanted to be like him. So I majored in mechanical engineering at Cal Poly Pomona. And at the end of the first quarter, I was on academic probation. Why? Because I had a D+ in chemistry, D+ in engineering, all which were math intensive, and an F in preparatory algebra. Well, it was a real traumatic time. I eventually took the advice of a counselor and took an anthropology course and a philosophy course that became majors in anthropology and minor in philosophy. And my world was resurrected. But it wasn't until many decades later that I heard that there's a name for what I had, which was dyscalculia. And when I heard that, I started crying. I was so emotional. I went outside and walked around the building twice. But I had this feeling of, yes, I'm not this horrible failure. I simply have a condition in my brain that doesn't give me that strength. And I recognize that I have other strengths. Can you relate to that, Donna?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Tears came, and relief, and an ability to love myself more.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, I tell people I'm time zone dyslexic because there's no way I could ever switch a time zone. And so I have everybody else do that. And when I coach, I have everyone call me because there's no way I could remember to call. I'd be stressed out all day. So, and my husband says, when I come out of the hotel room, I turn the wrong way 90% of the time. And now we can laugh about those things rather than just feel like I'm deficient.
One of the strategies for dealing with ADHD is scaffolding, finding external ways to remind yourself, to have a place, to prompt you, having the allies you're talking about, your husband doing the bookkeeping and finding people to help you out. These are all scaffolding techniques, right? Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with that term. But it's all about externalizing the resources, because there's certain resources that neurotypicals have in their brains that other people don't. And by simply calling them out, creating a device or a system of support that's out there that you can see, you can make a big difference. That board behind me is one of my scaffolds. I realized at a certain point, God, I'm a designer. I'm used to moving my arms. I need to be thinking big. That's changed my life. Kanbans have changed my life. It's just externalization of my brain, where I post-it notes to remind me of all the things I'm doing.
I'd like to share just real quickly a story about a client that I had that didn't have ADHD, well, actually does have ADHD as well, but he had face blindness, and he was in a very top position in a very well-known sports company. And so everybody thought he was conceited and not friendly, and it was hurting his ability to work with the team. And so we came up with the idea of him telling everyone. And once that happened, everyone would come up to him and say who they were, because passing in the hallway, he couldn't recognize them. And it completely changed his relationships. And he was on the verge of having to leave the company and instead turned it around.
Wow. So transparency, vulnerability, support,
Yeah.
all these came about as a result of that. All right, so Daryl, you're on. I
All
even
right,
feel
thank
good
you.
about,
Just really quickly,
I feel good about it, you know, after listening to Donna.
just really quickly, Bruce,
Yeah.
because Nanor had asked Donna, what was that? Was that called face blindness? I think, is that what you said, Donna? That gentleman had, your client?
Yes, and it
Okay.
is a known diagnosis, and people have different degrees of it.
Okay.
Some people can recognize people by the colors of their hair, and he was just completely face blind. He could only recognize his wife.
All right, thank you for that. I just want to make sure. And I saw that Lori did answer that question. So sorry, Lori, I didn't see your answer there. So yeah, your next slide, Bruce, is what is disability? And would you like me to read that?
I would.
Sure. Medically speaking, it requires a diagnosis. Under the ADA, however, a disability is any mental health or physical condition that causes significant difficulty when performing major life activities.
And these can include a lot of different areas of life, even more than that's on this list. And I include this because there are requirements in school when somebody is diagnosed with a learning disability to provide accommodations. And what's happening in the workplace is that there's other ways to do that, both in terms of how candidates are screened, how candidates are interviewed. And one thing I read was the idea that in the tech field, if somebody has cognitive differences and they have a gift maybe related to programming and that sort of thing, but they couldn't use someone else's computer as successfully as they could use their own, but they just let somebody use their own laptop when they come in for their performance part of the interview. It's an example of that. And it, you know, I'm including this in the discussion, not that adults with ADHD are necessarily disabled, but I think we need to be looking in this conversation at the disabled community as well, no matter what the source of that might be. I found this really interesting. Again, I like, you know, the researches that just helped me challenge my own prejudices, where it's easy to look at one model as just the medical model where there's something wrong with the individual, right? They have a problem, they create problems in the workplace. But the other is, oh, the person, what they're experiencing is barriers, societal barriers. And when those barriers can be addressed in the workplace and other organizations, again, it allows talent that may not otherwise be there to be present, to benefit, and for them to benefit from the process as well. Does anybody, you know, encounter issues, other people themselves, family members, experiences they've had that relate to disability?
I just want to say, and I don't want to cut anybody off, but one of the reasons why we wanted to look at this topic, especially with DEI, is, you know, when we were looking at it as the programming team, you know, it's like we're going to have clients, you know, that have all this kind of in the spectrum of DEI, JB, right? And to be exposed to that, because it's going to happen. We're going to have clients, or some of these issues might be ourselves as a coach, and how that comes into our conversations, into our coaching, into our work with that. And sometimes that even brings up prejudices and everything. And that's really the main emphasis of this. I just want to kind of stress is, you know, it's going to happen to us internally or with a client, and for us to know that beforehand helps us be better prepared. So, you know, that's what I just want to mention that again, why we're doing this. And this is such a really great topic, Bruce. And as I said, you're already engaged with Donna, who it touches her directly. So thank you again.
Yeah, and thank you for making that point. I don't think it was part of my focus, and it's a really important point. That we, you know, losing my train of thought. I'm going to come back to it, but thank you for bringing that up, that aspect of it. Okay, I've got some videos. So this is, when I practiced this, I was way ahead of where we are right now, but we've got an hour and a half to work. We've had a chance to do some discussions. I think these are really important videos. I just have a little bit of wrap up and then more time for discussion. And before we get into this, I'm going to relay the experience of one of my clients who has, diagnosed ADHD, multiple morbidities, sleep disabilities, some kind of bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder. And he's very, very challenged. He's a adult student in his 30s. And when we began 3 or 4 years ago, his marriage was a wreck, his house was a mess. All kinds of things happened, not just as a result of the coaching, but because of all the things he was doing and the coaching on ADHD. And he graduated from his community college class as a valedictorian. He got hired by the district, the same district. Recently, he was given a promotion, a substantial promotion. And he's left just going with imposter syndrome, going, oh, wait till they find out who I really am, right? High achiever, all these problems. He was considered 2E, twice exceptional, needing special ed and being in exceptional classes. And I relay this because here's somebody who could have easily not been hired in some organizations because he just didn't present well, who has provided a unique gift. And what he said was, think of it this way. One of my gifts is finding errors. My job is to go through the records and find errors. A neurotypical would go crazy with this job. So we do a service to other people by providing, fulfilling these roles that are not well suited to a neurotypical and that align with the special gifts that people have. So give me a moment. I'm going to stop sharing if I can. I haven't run into this problem before where I can't operate my mouse to stop sharing. Anybody have any suggestions? I need allies. So what I'm looking at is my screen. I've got a toolbar. There's a stop share. And the problem is that I can't see my mouse, but I can see it
says, I think I'll be able to, let me just try.
Okay.
We'll stop others screen sharing. Do you want to continue? Let me just click yes. Oh, but that'll have me share my screen.
Well, we can't both be sharing at the same time, so maybe that'll stop mine.
Yeah, let me just do that.
Ah, good.
Get out, and then I'll stop sharing. And now we're here.
All right, welcome back. So I'm now going to bring up the thing. So we're at the hour. Is anyone needing to leave right now? What I have are about 12, 13 minutes of videos. I may just play 2 of them. I think I'll just play 2 of them. It'll be about 7 to 8 minutes of videos, which are really instructive. And I'll lay out some possible benefits that you can think about, and the rest of the time we'll have the discussion. Laura needs to leave at 12:15. Thank you, Laura. Well,
job seeking had very much been the computer saying that the dots don't fit.
I can ask people why. I can ask people why all the time, which I want to do a lot. Not understanding how most people think is a real benefit.
I think it actually says somewhere on my diagnosis, Lottie prefers to play with construction toys. I was helping at a autism support group for parents, went along to that and met Emma.
When my son was born, I started to see a natural innovator. We started to realise that he was actually autistic. As I looked into autism, it became obvious. Natural innovators exist within the autism spectrum. They think outside the box. Currently, the way recruitment is set up, there is a possibility that you might really filter out some of those different types of individuals.
Diversity inclusion is hugely important for a global company such as Procter & Gamble. She said to me, my mission is to be one of the most autism-friendly employers in the world. Only 15% of individuals on the autism spectrum are in full-time employment. That's a stat that really quite shocked us.
We brought the National Autistic Society in. We set up a unique program to really bring in those different types of thinkers to really grow our approach to innovation. It's very practical. The second thing is we really make sure that they write down what they see. This stops too much interaction because social communication and interaction is what the autistic spectrum really struggle with. And what we were looking for was diversity of thinking.
One of the things that I know impressed the engineers on the experience day was the ability to take what I've learned and reapply it in new contexts. I work on front-end innovation, so that's consumer products that are several years away from reaching the market. What I've achieved at P&G is through key members of the team acting as interfaces for me to the wider team.
So I didn't know I had Asperger's. They did some training for people on site on how to work with people with autism. Penny really dropped that I could be autistic. What's really good as P&G is they're really flexible with me. My start and finish times aren't fixed. I work from home 2 days a week and able to just do my job well.
You have to make lots of adjustments in the workplace to really enable them to feel sufficiently comfortable and realise the potential that they can get to.
I don't have to work at my desk, so I can go work in a quiet huddle room because it's darker and quiet. Because everyone here accepts me, I don't have to try and hide who I am. It means that I'm not as tired when I get home. When I get home, I can do work on my charity that I started because I like sailing so much and it helped me a lot. We're doing the Fastnet, which is a 608-mile sailing race with an autistic crew. So that's going to be lots of fun.
The neurodiversity programs enabled us to bring different types.
Sorry, that was my mistake. Let me go back. I actually do have a mouse now. Give me a moment.
Types of thinking, and that thinking really enables us to drive innovation and produce new and different and better consumer products. Additionally, it really enables the individuals to feel empowered and to really have a successful and progressive career at P&G.
More.
When I was diagnosed with autism, the psychologist explained it like there were very limited career capacity for me.
Before I came to Microsoft, I was struggling to get employment, and I had these skills in math, but nobody was giving me interviews, and it didn't seem to be going well. I worked a couple of minimum wage jobs. It was work, it paid the bills, but I definitely could feel that I was destined for something more.
I feel like I get to have a pretty significant impact on Microsoft.
By having people with disabilities in the fabric of our company, you're building in a diverse workforce that then represents the 1 billion people with disabilities out there. We're going to be building better products, we're going to be building better services, websites, anything that we do will work across the spectrum of being human.
And so every time we get an opportunity to bring somebody in who can see things from a different angle, every time that happens, that's where we find these great creative types who can come in and help us deliver the things that we care about.
I'm Cody Takiyoshi, and I'm a software engineer at Xbox Live.
My name is Joey Chemis, and I'm a data scientist here at Microsoft.
MJ Gardner, software engineer on Azure build pipelines and engineering systems.
There is just an incredibly high unemployment and underemployment rate when it comes to autism. A traditional hiring process, that's not going to allow someone with autism to show up and show their strengths.
For me, the autism hiring program was the chance to finally, make it. You're saying, here's the things that come with autism that the standard interview process would flag. Here's how we accommodate those issues and make them less of an issue. And here's how we allow the person to really shine and show their true colors and abilities.
I think this is just a better way of evaluating. This is just probably a better way for anyone.
People are looking for companies that reflect humanity. There is incredible talent out there in the marketplace that should be in our company.
This program has given me a mirror to reflect on the things that make me different, or how could I maybe change the way that I work in order to bring some of these experiences forward.
My hope for the future is that we won't see this as a program, but instead a natural way to recruit key talent in our organizations.
So if I was talking to a younger version of myself, I would let myself know that you're gonna do really cool things and that you're gonna major in math, you're gonna really love it, and that you're gonna end up getting a really cool job at Microsoft that you just enjoy. The people, the work, the type of problems that are being solved.
So to be here is just really cool. I'm very proud of where I am.
So inspiring, huh? When the person in the first, woman in the first video is speaking, the thing that I took away was, she said something like, being able to just share how I think with other people allows me to be myself in the workplace. And I think that really addresses the issue of belonging. Right? Because if you have to hide yourself, what is the sense of belonging? What did other people notice? What kind of values did you see represented? And Laura, I want to give you a chance in case you would like to comment, because I know you need to go at 1:15, in case you have any.
I'm a little misty. I'm a crier, and I was deeply touched by it. And yeah, I think we need more of it. Because even in the typical, we have brain differences. I have gifts that someone else doesn't have, right? And we struggle with that in the workplace, I think, is because we expect people to think and act like us. Humans tend to do that. And so this is just the next, to me, this is just the next, I don't know what word to use, just the next difference. And I think we're way behind in recognizing it.
Anyone else?
Bruce, someone, oh, go ahead, Bruce.
Anyone else? And I see the request for the links. I'm putting them in chat right now. So is anyone else who had comments?
I do. Oh, sorry, Allison, go.
I was going to say thank you. All I was going to say is that I came from a big company before going into coaching, and I noticed that in these big companies, people get really stagnant quickly because people are so similar, and they still have this overarching demand to, and I hate using this phrase, but it's like, think outside the box. But you have all these people who think the same and aren't willing to take risks to bring up the important questions or to challenge what needs to happen to actually make progress. And then I was thinking about how there's always, like, if you're fortunate, somebody who's willing to take that risk and push this conversation into the unknown space, and how thinking about people with, you know, ADHD or any of these other conditions, bringing them in, it's natural. If people are just themselves and bring that capacity, then it automatically, it's a natural way to assimilate, and it has a built-in almost acceptance because you have a way to explain it, and people are so obsessed with needing to explain everything. It's like, no, this is who this person is. We intentionally brought this person in, and that is why we're, you know, assimilating them into this whole way of being like progressive. And I'm sorry for the long rant, but it's just kind of exciting to see it.
Thank you. Sharon.
Yeah, I just want to say I have a couple of cousins with who have children with ADHD. I'm sorry, I've had that too. No, but who have children that are on the autism spectrum, and I've never heard about these hiring programs. So to me, I want to thank you because I think it's something I'm going to pass along to them, and it feels like it's just really hopeful because they really, I think struggle with what the future is going to be like for their kids. And the fact that this is going on is really great.
Yeah, one of the statistics I saw was that something like 70% of the major corporations are actually incorporating these kinds of programs into hiring. So things are changing. Hopefully there'll be a brighter future for them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. I'm wondering if you would, I'm Tani, by the way.
Hi.
I'm wondering if you would share a little bit about the training program, where you got trained, how that, just explain a little bit more about the
Sure.
certification. That would be great.
Yeah, I went through something called International ADHD Coach Training Center, IACT, which you can look up. I think it's IACT.com. Lori Dupar. There's another one that's older. I forget the name of it. I think if you just search for ADHD coach training, it'll come up. And I had talked to the founder of that one. I decided on IACT because Lori was a psych nurse for many years before she became a coach. And she had this broad background dealing with neurodivergence, medication, and all of that. Medication is one of her strengths. And she was also local. She's now in Bellingham as well. She was down in the Seattle area. And it was, not only did she support us in learning about the fundamentals and the strategies, but also the business aspects of, how to go out and try to develop a business around ADHD coaching. So I was very pleased with it. That's one of the sources. If I have a chance, I'll look up the other one. So I'm curious, why are you asking that question?
I'm just interested to know how these, how these different programs are getting certified, what it means to be certified, and is there regulation around that certification, and how do they all compare one to another? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a certificate program that's sanctioned by the ICF. So it's not like an ICF accreditation, but it's a program that has been accredited by.
Yeah, it's very good. Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, different than coach program and training accreditation. Anyone else? Allison.
Sorry, one quick follow-up question to that I'm so glad. I'm sorry, how do I pronounce your name? I'm reading your pronunciation and I'm saying it wrong.
Tane.
Tane. I'm so glad you brought that up. Bruce, this is probably way too big of a question, but what kind of feedback, advice can you give to us if we're working with somebody with ADHD? Just anything that just stands out that you can share with us.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to some of our basic training. I know in my program, we were asked the question, so what do you think about judgment? And most of us thought judgment was bad, in coaching. And then it was pointed out, we all judge. What are you going to do with it, right? And in my experience since then, I've heard from others 3 different things that make sense, or 2, one I made up myself. One is to be curious. So fundamentally, to be curious, to be a learner, I think is a place to begin. 2 is to find acceptance, not that would apply in our situation. And the 3rd is to be able to laugh at ourselves, to realize it's really funny. It's not as serious as that seems to be. But the curiosity piece is a place to begin. I would be among the curiosities. I think that it's sometimes we need to be careful about, hey, have you ever been diagnosed with ADHD? I wouldn't start out there, but you could ask questions about, so what are the challenges you face in your life? Have you ever had problems with focus? Have you ever had problems maintaining attention or impulsivity? In other words, bringing some of the terminology, if you want to peer, And that's kind of a coach ethical question. How much are you going to bring your own agenda into the conversation? But if you think it has to do with, it could provide some kind of, you could provoke a conversation that might then let them volunteer more information that allows you to ask the question. I think it's completely valid to ask a question if you have enough evidence. You know, some of the things that you're talking about, I associate with other conditions like ADHD, and I'm wondering, have you ever looked at that? And I think it's fair because for some people who, like myself, back in 2005, well, no, I'm not ADHD, my friend is, that provocation can maybe open up some path for them to explore. And if they don't want to go down there, well, you know, we have to respect the client's agenda, right? I think that if their behavior, if their whatever they're doing in interacting with the coach becomes a problem for the coach, then it might be fair to address the issue. But that's where I would begin the conversation. And then there's just lots of resources. They can just research it, look for videos on ADHD on YouTube. And I think if somebody is, and they identify, they start self-identifying, that could be enough to be a catalyst to open up conversation or have them inquire more. That would be my approach. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, you're speaking to me one more time. Okay. So my thought is, after I've been working with somebody who does self-identify, their problem is that they're aware of it and they seek counseling for the ADHD piece, but they're working with me for motivation as they're, you know, starting their own business, having left a company that created a lot of structure for them. So they're having a problem with recreating structure, but then they keep revising their structure over and over again because it's just really hard to implement. And so what I'm trying to learn is just how I can be the best support for somebody who maybe they measure success and progress differently. Maybe they need, I mean, I don't judge it and I try to offer a lot of flexibility. I just want to make sure that I'm helping this person to the best of my ability.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
One idea might be, you know, I've noticed that we've been having this conversation for quite a while, and it seems like one of the reasons is that you started off with a certain concept, then it got completely changed, and then that one got completely changed. And coaching is about forward movement. How are you feeling about your forward movement? Something like that.
That's good. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Sharon.
Yeah, I have a question, Bruce. I have a background as a therapist, and I believe that I heard Dr. Barkley speak like many years ago. And if I recall from what I know as a therapist is the main, so I'm really kind of asking you about your experience, the main remedy treatment for ADHD is medication. So when you work with people that have ADHD, are they typically taking medication and you work with them, you know, in conjunction with that? Or I'm just kind of curious about what the latest is. I know some people with ADHD don't want to take the medication, and, you know, so I know that part is there, but yeah, so I just wondered kind of what your experience is with that.
Yeah, I would say the majority of the people that I work with have been diagnosed, have been prescribed medication, have tried or taken medication. Some people do not, some people are adverse to it. Where I have this kind of wheel of 6 points, and the very first wheel is to learn about the condition and to learn what kinds of medications and remedies are available to address it. It's fundamental. Russell Barkley talks about ADHD is diabetes of the brain. And if you had diabetes, you wouldn't be arguing about taking insulin. Right. Now, that's a pretty hardcore generalized approach. The reality is that there might be 20% of the people who just don't respond to medication, even though medication would be, you know, a prescription would make sense. And for those who do, there's no way to predict what kinds of medication. So there's stimulants and non-stimulants and there's a couple different classifications of stimulants. You have to figure out, you just have to test it. You know, the prescriber would take their best guess, and they'd be willing to be flexible with that and say, well, maybe the dosage isn't correct, or maybe we need to do it twice a day instead of once a day, or maybe we need multiple medications, one that's long lasting, one that's short lasting, right? Or one that's a non-stimulant, one that is a stimulant for those times when you just need a boost. So getting the prescription to work is a whole other task. And it's not as simple as saying, I'm taking medication. Does it work? Does it not work? And that really comes down to the quality of the prescriber. And that's becoming more and more challenging these days, unless you're lucky enough to find somebody who's there. I know that in my own case, I take something called Wellbutrin. In 2015, 10 years after diagnosis, I was a contractor at that time. I was putting in rainwater harvesting systems and a woodworker, and I was pissing off this one client because I wasn't showing up on time. I wasn't finishing the project. And I went to my doctor and said, I need help. You know, I wonder if you could prescribe Adderall. He was opposed to that, but he prescribed Wellbutrin. So my Wellbutrin story is in 2012 to 2017, I went through divorce and separation and divorce. Living in California, or having lived in California where my wife was, moving to Seattle and Bellingham, I made many trips to clean out the garage that never had enough room in it for a car. And it would often be a frustration for my wife, who would, you know, see very little progress when I come down. One time she was gone, and I worked for 3 days and pretty much cleared the whole garage out. She came in at night, shocked that so much progress had been made. And she said, I don't understand what happened. And the only thing I could think of is, well, I did start taking Wellbutrin. And then she said, you mean but she didn't complete the thought, right? It's this thought of, if we just figured that out early, maybe we wouldn't have to get divorced. 2 weeks later, I called my Southern California dentist, and I mentioned to Arlene, the wife of the dentist, who was a manager, office manager. I don't know why I want to tell you this story, but I shared that story with her. She said, it's really interesting that you did. A month ago, I told Dr. Haig, you go find a psychiatrist, you get medication, or I'm going to a divorce lawyer. And what happened? Well, he decided to go, and he's taking Wellbutrin, and everything looks okay. So it was like this incredible side-by-side comparison, right? And it's not that I have any regrets. The marriage I was in needed to come to an end. But it can show you the power of how much difference in medication can make.
Right. Yeah, I want to make one comment I feel like I'm obligated to say this, but you mentioned early on trauma, and to the people on this call, you know, there are symptoms that look like ADHD that are other things. So just because they have those symptoms doesn't mean they have ADHD. And I just think that's important to mention. Could be trauma, could be chronic stress, you know, there could be other things.
Thank you for sharing that. And Tane. Got
It's okay. We're running down to time. I'll let Nanar go.
Oh, well, mine is a simple-ish question, but I'm wondering if you have any resources for the scaffolding that you were mentioning and Donna was mentioning, like putting a purse on her lap. Like, is there a list that we can pick and choose from?
There probably is. I don't know where to find it, how to recall it. And I think scaffolding is a technical term. So if you wanted to search ADHD scaffolding techniques, no doubt there's somebody out there, an ADHD coach, that has addressed it and either has a talk or a list.
Okay.
But the concept is what's important. The principle is we take what would normally function in a neurotypical brain, neurotypical person, that's not functioning in the non-neurotypical, and externalize it. So, you know, in my case, this is my brain. In other words, these are all things I don't have to remember. They're prioritized, they're categorized. This is called a Kanban, it's a form of Kanban. And I think the most important thing is just think about what can I do to get a function out of my brain into the environment so it's physical, 3D, and visible. The main thing is the visibility.
Okay. Yeah, it slightly reminds me of actually in coaching, creating structures to help clients even like, succeed on the actions that they said that they were going to take, let's say, and creating a structure to support them to actually make, be in integrity, let's say.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
it's all about structure. I love structure. I had trouble creating it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tane, there's still more time.
I was just gonna add to some of what Sharon and Bruce were talking about earlier. I have my sister's was married to a man with severe ADHD. He's the kind of man that would he was child prodigy, playing the violin at age 9 in concert halls and reading 3 newspapers before 7 a.m. But the man would lose his car keys literally 25 to 30 times a day. And it didn't get diagnosed until, maybe 40s or his 50s. He's unfortunately passed. And part of it is not paying attention to the physical cues that were going on in his body to get ahead of the disease that took his life away. His 2 kids both have extreme ADHD, and they both have a different type of ADHD. One is super hyperactive, one is inactive, and they have a completely different sets of meds, both morning and night. And they go through periods of readjusting the meds for whatever reason, when there's higher stress levels, when there's more inactivity, all kinds of different things will impact how the chemicals are accessing and getting into the brain. And anyway, so I just wanted to mention that. One other little tip was, people are going to get a different diagnosis from a medical doctor than from a mental health practitioner, psychiatrist. And that may be something to be aware of, because the medical world really isn't as in tune with the nuances of the brain. And so I'm just mentioning that because I know that was a life lesson for them in their family ADHD journey. Yeah, so I just wanted to share some of that as well.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that last point about the psychiatrist is really key. The problem is finding a psychiatrist. I've referred somebody to a psychiatrist as a 4-month wait. She was lucky that there's somebody in our area that would accept it. So that's one of the challenges. And they're blessed because they have a prescriber that's actually paying attention and making adjustments and realizing that it's not all about just the authority that they have. They know what to do, but they have to listen and interact. That's really key. It's hard to find that. So you're really blessed. Daryl, are we at that point? I know you had an announcement. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, this has been great. I mean, we could go on for a lot longer time, I know, but I want to be mindful, of course, of everybody's time, and especially your time, Bruce, and being so generous with your sharing, your leading, your teaching, and everything. Is there a way that people can get in touch with you if they'd like to? If you want me to put that in the chat room and an email address or your website, so that people can do that?
I'll put both. It's real easy.
And as you're doing that, I just want to mention to all of you that this coming Thursday night at 6 p.m. Pacific time, we will be exploring more diversity with welcoming Patricia, Patty Ann Lee, and the topic is embracing diversity in your coaching. And so that's going to be more of a thing to explore this whole DEIJB topic as we continue this month. And just so you know, in 2023, we're planning on doing DEI events monthly, or if not monthly, quarterly at least. So you'll see a lot more of that coming the next year. I thank you, Bruce. I may be chatting with you at some point because you've got a 2-year jump on us up there in Washington with your DEI efforts and your chapters. So I commend you for that, my friend. And again, if you want to,
please let me connect you with the folks in our chapter that are leading that
Perfect.
effort. Love to.
Yeah, I would love that, to make that introduction. Thank you. I appreciate that. And his contact information is in there. And thank you. This was, yeah, as we see here, it was, very fascinating. I learned a heck of a lot, more than I thought I knew about this. And but again, this isn't, of course, to be a complete coverage of everything, but a good introduction and a good sharing. Thank you for all these personal stories we heard, for the vulnerability in this time, well, it's afternoon. I can say that for all of us in this afternoon. And thank you again, Bruce, for being with us and taking time to share your expertise and your passion, and blessings to you, my friend.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.